In this episode, we talked to Lee Fields, formerly of MXU. He's a former founder of that organization, and we've broken down some of their content on the channel. He is currently the front of house engineer for Hillsong United when they tour in North America. He has a background in house worship and just mixing and studio, live, all those kind of things. A lot of really great thought processes. I've followed him over his career over the last 10 years or so and really have admired him, and now realize like how similar our storylines kind of are. He's, a little bit further in his than I am, which kind of makes sense. He's a little bit older than I am, but really great dude, really interesting, really glad that we had the opportunity to sit down and kind of pick his brain and hear kind of some of his thoughts about when to hire people, how to think about gear before you buy it, what kind of outcomes does he think that you would get from buying, less expensive gear versus more expensive gear, a lot of those type of things, and very house of worship driven. That is where I would say almost all of his career has been. We talked a little bit about Andrew Stone as well. So make sure you hit subscribe, comment down below, because we are going to have him back on, and we didn't have enough time to answer get all of our questions answered because we had to wrap up. But if you have more questions that you would like him to answer, put them in the comments so that next time we interview him, we can add those to the list. So all right, here is our podcast with Lee Fields. Tell us about your background. Like, you're from Tennessee, you live in California now, but like, who are you?
Don't judge
what's your
me.
background?
So I grew up like a church kid, playing music in church, and I was in band in school. Like, I stopped playing sports once I was like not tall enough or skinny enough to continue high school sports, and then switched to music. So played drums in the high school marching band, picked up a bass guitar at some point, and like played in church with my friends. And then once it came time to go to college, like college for me and my family was not really a thing. I grew up pretty poor. I lived in a trailer park when I graduated high school. So like the thought of college was like, it wasn't really there. It's like, which factory in town are you going to go work at? That type of thing. And I just was not about it.
We're from Michigan. We get that.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know what like what is the next step further down the line of blue collar, but I guess it'd be like redneck collar. Like it's more like that, So I was like bound to go be an electrician or something, or not even like be an electrician, but like crawl under houses and do the jobs that the electricians didn't want to do. That's where I was headed.
An eternal apprentice.
Yeah. But my family didn't make any money, so my mom applied for one of the loans you get kids that don't have any money to go to college, and it was like $25,000 to go to Lee University, and that's where I went. Mm-hmm. And I went for 9 months or something and dropped out. And she, God bless her, paid that bill. I never paid a dime of it. She paid all of it. But I dropped out because I went on the road with a band. And it was a Christian band. So that, I'll fast forward a lot. It was Disciple.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's like Christian rock band. They're still going. Yeah. But they get signed to Sony. They start playing with other bands, bigger bands. And then I start mixing for headliners at tours that we were opening on. And it's just like the classic touring story, like, started out of this 19-year-old kid just blowing speakers up, and then next thing you know, I'm working for the headliner a year later, and then I ended up moving to California in 2010. I got off the road. I got married, moved to California, and started working at a big church out here. And then that's really when it was like, wait, there's these huge churches with state-of-the-art AVL systems, and so I got hired to be just the audio guy of a church of probably 12,000 people at the time. And then over the course of about 10 years, that transformed into I was executive worship pastor, and then we had 12 sites. So it was teams at every location and a worship school, and the church was about 20,000 people. It was crazy. So there's like 60 people on my team if you counted some of the students also. But, when you're working in ministry, like, and you're living in California, there's a lot of financial pressure there, and like houses are expensive and kids, and how am I going to do all this? And then So I started doing like this little side hustle, and you asked me this earlier, like how I started MXU. It originally it was like I need to remodel my bathroom. How am I going to make an extra $5,000 this year? And that's literally what it was. But then also like I had this deep desire to always keep getting better, and I see that in all kinds of different areas of my life, and like whatever hobby I have, it's really the same thing. It's just I get so obsessed with it. And audio's always been like that since I started it, you know, messing around on a old Pro Tools rig, or I had Nuendo in my college dorm room, you know. I'm just like obsessed with stuff, whether that's golf or archery, and the two things I've obsessed over in the last 10 years. So I asked two buddies,
the one that like has those big old like drive bays, right?
Well, I mean, Nuendo is like Steinberg's DAW. It's like Cubase. So, like Cubase on steroids was Nuendo. I think Yamaha maybe owns it now. But yeah, I had that in my college dorm room with an M Audio Delta 1010 was my interface, and like little Guitar Center studio monitors and an AKG 414 that another guy at school let me borrow. That was like what I learned on.
Nice.
Yeah, so the MXU thing started just out of a need to like make a little extra money and then to get better. And Andrew Stone and I were like, we were buddies because he's the freaking GOAT. He's one of the best front of house engineers I've ever met, ever, period, in any genre. So I was going to Tulsa just as much as I could for any reason at all. I was using church money to like just go there on a weekend and just soak it in and hang out with those guys. And of course, I'd go to all their conferences and stuff that you would want to go to, but I would find any reason to go to Tulsa, Oklahoma to be around that guy because of how freaking good he was. And then we became friends. And so then it's like, well, I got this idea, like, let's put our consoles in a room and play tracks. And I want to be able to stop you in the middle of the song. And I want to hear that reverb on Andy's vocal. I want to know exactly how you did it. So we're like, yeah, let's do that. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like we should sell tickets to this. Like people would just want to be able to sit in the room and hear that. And like there's value there. And that's how it started. So we're like, okay, let's sell 100 tickets to the first one. I think Andrew at the time had like 3,000 followers on Instagram. I probably had like 1,000. I'm not sure about Jeff wasn't really active on social media yet. And we just announced it on our Instagrams. And we sold 100 tickets. I think we sold like the 100th ticket like the day of, and we called it a sellout, you know, because that's what you do. Yeah. And it was awesome. We learned from each other. And that's kind of the thing. Like at the end of it, we were like, would we do this again for ourselves? If so, let's keep doing them. Like, who cares if people come or not? We can't lose money. And that's what happened. And then we did them all over the country for the next 2 or 3, 4 years, and then ended up doing them in Europe. And at that point, it was like, okay, we got something here. It wasn't like, let's go quit our jobs, because it was still side hustle, but instead of like remodeling a bathroom, now I'm remodeling a kitchen. You know, it's like, it wasn't going to replace our church jobs. And then once we did the one in Europe, I was like, okay, something's got to give here. So I had just decided we needed to put this thing online. And subscriptions were taken off. You know, the culture has just changed so much, and subscriptions are just a part of everybody's life. And I thought it could really help people. I thought the biggest need in the church production community is training. It's education. And it's not that hard in 2018 to start a subscription. I mean, I say that. I guess it actually is kind of hard, but like everything's kind of set for you. So like you get a stack of software and they all work with each other and they talk to each other. And then from then it's just, you got to have a killer product and a killer marketing plan. And I felt like we had that. So
we time consuming, maybe not hard, but time consuming.
Yeah, it is time consuming. And I didn't quit my job. So I would get home from the church and then I'd work till midnight on this thing. Yeah. You know, and fast forward a few years, it was wildly successful. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people on that app every single day. And I sold it about 6 months ago.
When you guys lost Andrew, did you guys almost give up, or was that not like in the cards for you guys?
No, wasn't even a thought. Like I could just see Andrew just cussing me out.
I think you guys even said that in like a "Are we going to continue" thing.
Probably, yeah. I remember being like super emotional, like in Tulsa afterwards, and like
Absolutely.
everybody was asking us like, "What are you gonna do?" So I think we even put a video out like when we were in the church, like the next day or something, like, "Hey, we're gonna keep going," because he would want us to, and I do think so. He would have kicked my ass if I hadn't have kept it going. You know, I think I'd have to go back and look. Well, I can't really do that anymore, I guess, but. Like the subscription had just started. I think it was like 8 or 9 months in when he passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we kept going, and I think, I mean, it grew like tenfold after that. It was just crazy what happened. Cause you don't know, like he had a big draw. Like he was more
absolutely.
of an influencer than I was by a lot. So you could easily argue this, that a lot of its early success was just built on his notoriety. I was the idea guy out of the group. So a lot of the business ideas and like, of what we did and how we built it and how we marketed it was more me, but then it was built on his shoulders, if that makes sense. Like he supplied the first platform, and eventually I think the platform outgrew any of our names, which is what you want it to do. And then now I've sold it. I'm not a part of it anymore. I should have said that up front. Like I have nothing to do with the company. So
Yeah.
I don't even know what they're doing these days, to be totally honest. But yeah, that's kind of the story, man. And then sold it about 6 months ago.
So why did you sell? Why did you get out?
We had been approached by some people like interested in the company, and
Okay.
I had a different thought on what to do with my future. And then I went through a lot of life change also in the last couple of years, and it just made sense for me to do that. So
Gotcha.
that's really it. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
think
a finisher. I'm a total starter. So I was always in the mindset of like, I'm going to sell this thing.
And when you know
Always.
that about yourself, like things just make sense because now you're free to go launch something different, which we want to talk about in a little bit. But
yeah, and that was my thing.
Totally.
So when I worked at my church, it was like I would go, man, I feel like we need this, and I'd like look around and everyone's like, and I'm like, so I'd start it and go, does everyone like this? Like, yeah, like great, you take over it.
Yep.
I'm gonna go start another thing. So
yeah, that's kind of me. Like I can't even finish tying my shoes sometimes. Like I'm just always like 5 steps ahead. So I was already getting to the point like I'm ready to sell this thing, and we had been approached and there were some conversations happening. I don't think that's their plans now. Like I can't speak for them. Like I said, I have no idea what they're doing. But but for me, I was always like, how soon can we sell this thing?
yeah,
Well, thank you. I mean, for all of us from the community, thank you. MXU is such a tool. And we talk about it all the time in the podcast. Train.
I hate the word training because like I feel like I can't train someone. Like I can educate them, but it's like it's on them to like take that and execute it and be an artist with all that kind of stuff. But
and you guys gave us the tools. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I don't know how many of your subscriptions I sold, to churches.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. My children, thank you.
One of my most popular videos on this channel is me breaking down your video with Andrew about gain structure.
I saw that, yeah.
So
I saw that. That's pretty cool. And I thought how overweight I looked, and I'm glad I don't look like that anymore, is actually what I thought. I've still got a ways to go. I still need to lose some pounds, but
I see it though.
Big
You
boy
have
then.
gotten thinner, man. Good on you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, testosterone helps.
yeah, you guys did like a weight competition thing for a while, didn't you? Like who could lose the most weight?
Yeah, all right. Probably like a year or two before I left, we got pretty serious about it. My life was like a mess during that time. Like I was having all kinds of issues. So I totally just neglected that whole challenge, thinking back about that. Like I remember being like guilty or feeling guilty. I'm like, I'm not doing this. I'm just not in the right state of mind right now.
Do you have any other like makes you questions you want to ask before we move on from that?
No, I mean, I was just going to say like, yeah, Stone, like I am just a big fan of Stone. And it's funny.
Same.
You mentioned you were trying to get any excuse to get out to Tulsa. I actually did a motorcycle road trip out to Tulsa. I needed a destination and I was like, oh, church on the move. And Andrew totally hosted me. And it was just, it was such a blast to be there for a weekend. So
he's so funny. Like, had you met him before that? Or had any connection with him?
no, just like straight cold email.
Dude, he comes off like a freaking tool a lot. and had a reputation when he was touring to just be a freaking jerk. And he would tell you this, like he'd think this is funny.
Yeah.
And he kind of carried this like, you know, I don't know. He had this like aura about him. Like he carried a presence, and it was a bit intimidating if you weren't close to him. But he would always do stuff like that. So he would get a cold email from anybody and say like, I'm coming here, can doing this and doing that. And he was always the most welcoming person.
Yep.
He was like when people say like, oh, he's just a teddy bear, he is just a teddy bear. But at the same time, like when it came time for like show mode, it's like, hey, we're meaning business right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I watched him have a drummer tune a kit from front of house. I was just like, what is going on here?
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, like even when you say that, I was like, what's weird about that? That's normal first. Yeah.
Right. Because he was a drummer. So
yeah. He's something else. I miss that guy.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, we definitely lost a master, So All right, so if we move on, are you cool with us just picking your brain, just asking you a bunch of random questions?
Mm-hmm.
That's
totally.
like the whole basis of this channel, right? Is just like to try and help people elevate things. Mm-hmm. There's a lot, Enhance, right? We're enhancing everything, right? So, so I've got to list my questions, and then you can chime in whenever you want to ask your questions. What would you say to people who only want really, really expensive gear? Like they think that like expensive gear is the solution to everything. And that could be like a church of like 50 people that are like, you know what? We need a Digico. That's going to solve all of our problems, right? Because I've seen on that church tech page, I know you used to be on there all the time, but it was like, hey, I'm thinking about getting this X32 or this SD9. Which one should I get? And it's like, okay, well, those are wildly different.
I'm friends with a lot of people that work at manufacturers, and I'm going to try and relate this to like something else. So I'm assuming most of the people in your audience aren't like paid staff at a church, because most people that are in the community aren't, right? It's like you get one guy on staff and he may have a handful of volunteers or 20 volunteers. So, I think if you look in any field, I think this maybe apply maybe 90%. That statement's not true for a lot of things. Like my two hobbies in life, archery and golf. And I don't do much archery lately, but I do a lot of golf right now. And it's the same thing. It's like I have to have this Scotty Cameron $600 putter, and it will help me be a better golfer. And everybody knows that is just not the case. The thing about sports is you cannot argue if the ball goes in the hole or not. Everyone knows if it went in or if it did not, right? Yeah. With audio, it's subjective. It's better than it was. And it's not the ball in the hole or not, right? So it's like we have all these sound problems, and Digico, I can't just pick on them. So Digico or Avid or whoever will fix all of our problems. Okay. The thing with money and audio gear is, I believe there's not really any truth to you get what you pay for when it comes to the quality of the product, the outcome. Okay. To a point, okay? So people are going to roast me for this if I don't really explain this. Now, I used to believe that there wasn't much a difference in preamps on digital consoles, and I was kind of vocal about that. Like, I remember probably back in like 2010, 11, 12, 13. Now, I think the better I've become as an engineer and the better I can hear, but also the better equipment has gotten. That's not really a true statement, but it is generally, right? Like, I can pick on Behringer because I just love to pick on them. The preamps on the wing, if you have them side by side with other consoles in that price tier, there's not that much a difference, really. But if you compare it to the preamps on an SSL or a Rivage, it is a massive difference, okay? And then you can go a step further, and I mixed at, there's a church in Louisville, Kentucky. I've become good friends with those guys there, Brad and his team, Southeast Christian. Mm-hmm. They have Shadow Hills preamps for their drums. And that's an analog preamp, like super bougie. I mean, the knob is the size of my hand. And you turn it like this. Like, it's the coolest looking gear. Like, Shadow Hills makes the coolest looking audio equipment. They really do. And it was awesome, and it sounds better than the Digico 32-bit pre's, okay? I'm sorry, it just does. But something sounding better is not going to solve your problems when you've got 100 other problems, right?
Right.
It's like, when people say, like, with consoles specifically, this is what you hear. You hear it with consoles and PA, okay? You don't really hear it a lot with microphones, because you put a 57 on a snare drum, and it's hard to argue that it doesn't suck. Is a $300 Lawton snare drum mic going to sound better? Maybe. There's nothing necessarily wrong with your 57 either, right? So spending 3 or 4 times the cost on another microphone does not get you 3 or 4 times the outcome with a microphone. With the console, the only reason that money should solve your problems is if you don't have enough I/O. And I've said this for a long time.
Or functionality.
Like, I think a church, their budget on consoles should be dictated by their I/O needs. Not their Instagram page, because the Digico is the coolest looking one. Right. Not because they think that their M7 sounds bad, which it does. The M7 doesn't sound great, okay? But I don't know that that's a reason.
You don't like the sound of ripping paper?
I know. That's an old console, so it does need replaced now. If anybody has one, you should just replace it, because it's older than Joe Biden.
I have 2 clients that have them and refuse to give them up.
Yeah. But they work, right? It's like driving an old Datsun pickup truck. Like, it's not going to die. Yeah. So you're just going to have to decide you don't need it anymore. It's just not a reason. Like, I don't think sonics are a reason for a small church to upgrade equipment, because I guarantee you that training, they will get way more return on training than they would anything else.
Yeah.
So when you learn how to mix, it's the same thing. Like, if somebody sends me their tracks, or somebody comes to my house for like mixing lessons, and they bring their stuff in 2 hours, I can from scratch give them something better than that they've been working on every week for a year. And I'm not trying to brag on myself, but I do this every single day. I've been doing it for 20 years. I'm pretty gifted at it, because it's a skill set thing. It's not because I have barefoot monitors in here. They help, but they're not required. So it's the same thing. Like, and let me hit the PA thing. Is there a difference sonically in an Acoustics PA and a JBL? Yeah, there for sure. There absolutely is. Mm-hmm. Do you have to have an Acoustics PA to sound good? And that's the only way it's going to happen? No. You do need a properly optimized sound system to sound good. You have to point speakers in the right places. You have to put your subs in the right places. Yep. It's like, that stuff is more acoustics. The acoustics of your room have way more to do with the audio experience for the church than maybe the PA system does, really. And I thought 10 years ago that people would take acoustics more seriously by now, and they just haven't. I don't know why, and I think they should.
I mean, I feel like I'm seeing like an uptick in people taking it more serious. Like, I would agree. I don't think enough people, and I don't think it's still like the first thing that people think of, but it's still, right. I feel like I'm hearing people say it more. I think I'm seeing people ask more questions about it. Acoustics can just be expensive, and like, when you've got $70,000-$80,000 PA and $50,000 worth of acoustic paneling and installation, like, that can be daunting for a lot of places.
People view acoustics like vitamins instead of painkillers. It's like, I know we should do it, right, but it's not sexy and it's not that important. But it really is a painkiller. It's really like, why did we spend $500,000 on this PA and it didn't give us much different result than our $80,000 PA we had before? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, because you just put a scoop of ice cream, or you put whipped cream and a cherry on a meatball. You haven't switched it out to vanilla ice cream yet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think that plays true to a lot of places, but there's a lot of places I've done where, like, years ago, when Wi-Fi was still a thing, we had a church that they had, I don't even remember what it was, but it was like they were just spraying audio everywhere. And we were like, they're like, yeah, they want $100,000 worth of acoustic treatment in this room. And we were like, well, why don't we try and bring all the energy off the walls as much as we can and control what we're doing, and then see if it's if it's feasible, and then maybe we're only spending $15,000 on acoustic treatment. And they were like, okay, yeah, let's do that. So I think we spent like $60,000 doing this, this Wi-Fi rig in there, and they were perfectly happy with it. It was like it solved all of the major buttons, and they didn't do any acoustic treatment at all. That's not obviously every case scenario, but like there are some of those case scenarios, and everyone thinks that they're that, and it's like, yeah, well, we got to figure out what's wrong. Is it your room that's actually wrong, or is it your PA that's wrong?
Right. It's physics, right? And I wish it was taken as seriously as the air conditioner in a room. It's like, well, we have to have air conditioner,
or the
because
parking
we
lot.
don't. People are in pain. Well, they just don't know that it sounds bad, or that it could sound so much better,
It's amazing watching like people that don't understand that are like the fighters, and then they hear the demo and they go, oh, that's what it could sound like.
Right. And the new cardioid PAs.
Yeah.
It's difficult for people to understand the benefit from those, but I think it's worth it, because it's a big difference. I've been in rooms where I've been able to have some D&B-Js hanging beside KSL in a room I've been in a lot, and it is a giant difference of the acoustic response in the room. Just by cutting 20 dB off the back of the PA, what that does is remarkable.
Yeah.
So I think we'll start seeing more of the entry-level manufacturers starting to sell that stuff, which should be cool.
I like what you said there. It doesn't always guarantee a great return on investment. So I think that's,
Yeah.
Yeah, training always does, and it's the cheapest upgrade you can do.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we did we had a topic where we talked about gear lust? Do you think that like that plays a role in this, where like people like they want to like look at my Gucci, PA,
new gear day.
Yeah, here's my new gear day, like type thought process. Like I've always felt like there's a certain level of disgust I have for those kind of things. There's a difference between like, hey, we've waited 20 years and we're excited for this, and we're not going to upgrade again for 20 years. And I'm excited, but like there's some of these posts that are like, wow, like I feel kind of gross that you're like flaunting what you're flaunting, as often as it seems like you are. So do you think that plays a role in that as well?
Yeah, I don't like that either. And I don't like it for nonprofits and churches, just because I have just a special affinity for them, because I was a part of it for so long, and I still attend church. So I don't love that when I see churches do it. Like when you see like a tour have the latest and greatest, like it's not a big deal. It's a for-profit company. They can kind of do what they want. But yeah, like when a church, like I see it two ways, like upgrading, and then you see a 700 seat room that's 50 feet deep with a giant line array that could fill an arena. It's like, what the hell? That's what you guys just wasted $300,000. That it used to really bother me, and I'd get really worked up about it. Or I'd see like a PM1D in the Baptist Church Fellowship Hall. Like, I have seen that. Like, what the heck is this? And I just try not to be bothered by it anymore. I'm like, would I do things differently? Yeah. Do I think it's wrong? That's hard for me to use that word anymore. I wish people were educated, and it's probably like an ego thing too. It's a bit of like people feel better about themselves having better gear.
Yep.
But I take it back to golf. Like I have a brand new set of golf clubs I bought this year, and I went last night to try some different ones that I might get next year. We're talking like $1,000 and not $250,000 or $100,000, but like we all do it. But I think it really comes from like we don't treat the church budget like it's our own money.
Right.
And if you can do that, not everybody, a lot of people do think about this that way. But when you don't, it's easy to go, oh, this KSM9 just really isn't doing it for me, so I want to try the Neumann. Like, well, do you really need to spend $900 because you don't know how to set a high-pass filter? You know, like, and you might need it. Like, okay, it'll get 10% better, but you make decisions like that all the time, once a month throughout the year, and you just spent $10,000 on stuff that was like, well, what if you had spent all that money on like taking your team to a conference or doing more training events or volunteer appreciation or other stuff? Like, I think you get more return out of that stuff than you do swapping out a Neumann for a KSM9 or a DPA or whatever.
Yeah, and I had a client where they were talking about like, hey, do we go SD9 or do we do Avantis? And I was like, I really feel like the Avantis fits every need, checks every one of your boxes. And I think at the time, the package that they were trying to do, it was like $17,000 cheaper. And I was like, they didn't have a full-time staff member at that point. And I was like, I'd rather see you guys hire somebody, send them through some education, get them trained, and, bring up that person and spend less money on this Avantis setup, and I feel like long-term, like, it'll benefit the church longer. And they were like, oh man, we didn't even think about that. They're like, we were just trying to think of like, what can we put in here and get our volunteers trained on and just have better services. And it's like, I don't think you're going to do anything different on the SD9 than you would on the Avantis, right? And so it's like, why spend the extra cash on it, So yeah, that's kind of where we've been. And speaking of like that volunteer, like paid staff member, like when do you think that a church should just like bite the bullet and hire someone to be on staff to run audio or production technically, because like very rarely are they going to do one thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's outcomes. If you can get the same outcome from your team without a staff person as with a staff person, then you should not hire a person. But if it's dependent on a volunteer, you can't have such high expectations for a volunteer team as you can a staff person. Like, can you expect this volunteer tech leader to be there every single weekend to make sure everything's going awesome? Yep. I mean, you can, if you have someone that does that, then that's amazing. And you're saving a lot of money for the church. And maybe you can hire a student pastor before you can hire a tech person, or, I think it's going to be case by case, but I do think it's like anything with like running a company or anything. Like, at some point, your threshold of pain will dictate that, right? So it's, if things aren't going well, and the pastor or the worship team, they are requiring a certain level of execution technically to pull off the type of ministry that they want to have. At that point, somewhere in that, you're going to have to decide, we need someone that's actually responsible for this, can lead this team of people, who can steward the money well. I've seen plenty of churches that have volunteer leaders in that department that are freaking ballers, and they've got Monday through Friday jobs, and they're successful in other places. And then like, this is their hobby that they're obsessed with, and they do a great job. But what happens when they leave? It's like, well, you're probably gonna have to hire someone immediately, because these volunteers are basically like unpaid staff, right?
Right.
So I think that's case by case. I don't think there's a number. I don't think there's a budget level. I mean, if you look at trends, it feels like churches that are more modern, the evangelical non-denomination churches, are usually hiring that person around 700-800 people is when they start, like maybe part-time or contractors, 1,000 people, and maybe they're going full-time with a younger guy, and they're paying, $15-20 an hour or something like that, is typically when you see that. And, for a church just looking to hire for the first time, if you can find someone that's a leader, and can shepherd people, and at the same time knows their way around technically, and they're smart enough to use other resources, other companies, an integration company to fill in the gaps that they have. I think it's better to hire someone who's a team leader than it is like a savant technical person.
Absolutely.
Like you don't want Dante ruining your service. Like, so there's a certain level of technical know-how that person's going to have if you have put in a system that requires that. So it's a balance of both, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great answer.
The pastor I worked for at the big church here in town I worked at, he would always say, like, when you're hiring support staff, he put them in two categories, above the line and below the line. So above the line people added people to the church. So they'd be like youth pastor, men's pastor, like they can actually help grow the church with their leadership and their ministry. And then below the line is support staff. It's HR, facilities, IT. It's support ministry that don't necessarily add to. The technical leader in the church can actually be both.
Right.
Sometimes it can feel like a bit of a unicorn to find a leader, and they don't have to be extroverted. Like you can have an introverted leader, plenty of them. But if you can have someone that can grow a team and knows how to patch Dante controller, then that's like the best of both worlds. Or knows how to set up a video router and is thinking about their next team training and volunteer appreciation hangout event. Like that's what you want in the first person you hire.
Yeah.
That's interesting, that above the line, below the line. I've not heard of it used like that.
Yeah.
But that's great.
I'm not certain like what the line is, like what he meant by that, like that specific of it, but you understand, like it means like when we hire this person, it'll help grow the church.
Right.
And in some ways it can help, like we're talking nonprofits and fundraising, so it can actually help pay for that position. Like
right.
A lot of times when the church hires their first men's pastor or worship pastor, like they kind of pay for themselves because the families, they're attracting families, they're keeping families, they're discipling, they're talking about giving. Like it just all works itself out. So, technical person that can also contribute to that is like win-win.
Yeah. All right, we only got a couple more minutes. You got any questions? Because I've got tons. I can just keep going.
You can just keep going, yeah.
All right, so
I'll give shorter answers so you can.
No, I mean this is good. We'll just have to have you back on to keep going.
That's great. Yeah.
So what would you say the number one fundamental would be to have your audio guys like learn?
Listen to music.
When you say listen to music, do you mean a specific thing? Like, should they just start listening more worship music, or should they like broaden their horizons and listen to like just tons of stuff? All music.
So if we're talking audio person, we're talking less about systems and more about mixing. It's music is only, some churches it's 12 minutes, some it's 45. But it's the most complex audio engineering requirement we have in live performance, whether that's church or not, is whether it's 18 channels on stage or 100, it's the most challenging. And it's an artistic skill that requires technical know-how.
Right.
So, we're painting a canvas, but our paintbrush and our paint is computers and it's physics, and there's a lot of technical chops required. So the biggest thing when training people is like if they can't hear, and I don't mean like can you identify 2K over 200 hertz, I mean
listening.
It's a listening skill. Robert Scoville says that a lot. The way he eloquently says it is probably the best I've heard it. Is like mixing is a listening skill. So you don't have to play an instrument to be a good music mixer, but you do have to be a musician. I really believe that. Like I'm a musician first, and I believe that's the foundation of the skill set I have, and why I've had success mixing music is because I'm a musician first. But I just love music and in any genre. Adam Taylor sent me a song yesterday. He was like, check this mix out, it's slamming. And it's like a almost metal band with like country lyrics. Like it's a weird like enigma of an artist. And it sounded good. And it's like it's no dynamic range, everything's the same volume, like it's super compressed. It's like it's that whole thing, but it sounds cool. And the drums sound enormous.
Country rap lately?
Yeah, it's a band called Lakeview. So it's not gonna win any awards for like best engineered. It's not Steely Dan or anything, but it sounds cool. The drums sound really big on it. And he sent that yesterday, and I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. So I'm just constantly listening to stuff.
Cool. All right, one more question, and then I think we'll let you go.
Okay.
So you got into a bit of a spat with my favorite microphone manufacturer.
Yeah, are they actually your favorite?
I would say that they've become my favorite just because I like the way that they sound and how cost effective they are. Do I think that they're the best out there? No, by no means. I think there's better stuff out there, but like we're on SE microphones here, and you know, I do genuinely like them. When I found them a couple years ago, yeah, I was just really impressed that like a $100 microphone could sound as good as that SEV7. And I've been pretty impressed with a lot of their stuff. But yeah, I was just curious, like, could you speak into it and like, how did that all end up? I know that there was some behind the scenes stuff and whatnot.
Yeah. So when that microphone came out, the SEV7, the first time I saw it was Justin Timberlake was using it.
I think that's where we all saw it.
We all saw it on an award show or something. Like, what is that?
I think it was the Super Bowl
microphone.
Chris Stapleton used it at the last Super Bowl too, I think.
Yeah. So, does Stapleton still use it live?
He did at this past Super Bowl. I don't know if he's still currently using it, but he did in February.
I've not been to a Stapleton show, but I've been told by my peers that that's one of the best sounding shows. That his front of house guy's a monster, and I want to hear that. So that microphone came out, and when it came out, how much was it? $120, $130 or something?
Maybe 100. I don't even think it was that. I think it was like 119 or something like that.
Great.
With tax.
So I try it out, and it's a dynamic microphone that had a high frequency response like a condenser. So it had this like little extra sparkle on the top, and it was really tight. So it didn't have a lot of drum bleed in it. And I raved about it. I told everybody about it. Like, this is the greatest thing ever. 6 months later, I was hearing this like weird distortion thing happening, and I thought it was the Accent, and it wasn't the Accent. Did a bunch of tests, and then ordered some more microphones. Like 6 of them, and not all of them sounded the same. And some of them, the low mid thing, the distortion thing went away, and then a few months later it would come back. So then I'm really frustrated. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And then switch microphones. I think at the time I switched to a Neumann, and really like that. And then I've switched. Now I prefer. It depends on the band and the singer, but like a 58, Beta 58 or the Neumann are probably like my go-to. So as time goes, you know, I'm then talking about like, I don't like this V7 microphone anymore. It does this like thing. And I'm talking to some like A-level baller front of house guys who mix with the biggest bands in the world. And I'm hesitant. I'm like, what do you think of the V7? And one guy was like, oh, that microphone does this thing where it like stops. And my eyes lit up, and I'm like, that's the perfect way to describe it, like the low mid thing. And he's like, and they don't all sound the same. And I'm like, I know. So then I was like, okay, I'm not crazy. So then I call a buddy who owns a company that sells them, rents them. And I'm like, hey, you hearing any problems? And he's like, no. And then he did a bunch of tests on a bunch of different microphones, and he calls me back and he's like, hey, they're all the same. I'm not seeing anything. And I'm like, okay. So through more and more conversations, I'm hearing more people like with issues with them. And then as time's gone, that number's increased. Like people are like, yeah, I had problems, or yes, I hear what you're talking about. And then, you know, over the last like, I don't know, 18 months or so, it kind of died down. And then there's a meme account who was posting jokes about it. Like, it's an anonymous meme account on Instagram called Parnelli Shit. And he said something about like, have you guys put all your microphones, your V7s for talkbacks yet? Or is everyone still drinking the Kool-Aid? And I reposted it, and then my DMs lit up. Probably the most people that have agreed with me that I've seen yet. And I was like, okay, people are figuring this out. So I start reposting screenshots of my DMs, and I cut people's names and photos out of it so you couldn't see.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many I did, 7, 10, 20 of them. And SE, whoever runs their social media account, replied, "Hey, we'd like to speak with you."
You can't not reply to that.
No. Yeah, and I was like, I think I even I was a smart ass about it, and I said something like "sure," and I spelled it SHURE.
Nice.
So I set up a call, and it was with, I think I get his title right, like the vice president of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Hey, he's a super nice guy." First of all, the phone call was awesome. Okay. It was great. It wasn't confrontational. It was honest. And I have a lot of respect for the guy. And he admitted some of the faults, and the things I was hearing were real. And there were also other issues with the manufacturing that I hadn't experienced that they had identified and were working on. I think there was a shock mount issue that they've since rectified that. And he was just honest about Asian manufacturing. And, you know, I believe it's a Chinese company, and they're also made there, but they've got staff all over the world, great people that work there. And people love their customer service, you know, and I think they have to have good customer service because there are issues. So I'll circle back. Remember that company that did all the testing, and he called me and said, "I haven't had any issues." Well, I circled back with him, and he's like, "Oh, we don't sell them anymore because I had so many problems with them." So it ended up showing its head with him too. So yeah, there are problems with it. And I think it's like any company with Chinese manufacturing, like the quality, it's not German, okay? It's not Swedish, and it's not American.
Yeah.
And there's going to be problems. But there's a reason it's only $100. So it is difficult for me to see somebody buying those microphones when a 58 costs the same amount of money, you know? And it's like, that's the most bulletproof microphone probably ever made, the 57 and 58. And they're also $100. And I genuinely think too, though, like some people just can't hear what other people can hear. And if you can't hear it, it's not going to bother you. If you don't know it's there, you're just not hearing it, and it doesn't bother you. So those microphones don't like stop in the middle of service or a show. Like they're going to continue to work. So they're not like showstoppers and people are writing them off completely. But the other thing that's happening too is like I know some of these huge tours that are using them, some of these big artists, they use a brand new microphone every day or every week. They switch them out.
Interesting.
Yeah. I did find that out. I'm not going to say any names, but the big ones, they are using sometimes daily. He gets a brand new microphone.
I could see it. I mean, for a show for $100, $130, like.
I mean, I've seen tours that like where the guitar player wants to like smash his guitar every night, so he plays like a first act guitar so he can smash it every night.
Yeah. So I don't get paid by these guys, but I just happen to have one sitting here because I just let somebody borrow it and they brought it back to me. But the Lawton, snare mic and tom mic, American company, they are made overseas. These things are awesome, and they QC every single one of them when they get back to the U.S. So they get tested again. These are new microphones, so time will tell like how long they hold up, but they're tanks. It just feels different. It doesn't feel like an SE microphone. It doesn't feel as cheap, but they're also not $100. Like it's $300 or $400. So it's just a different thing. So I'm not like writing off anything made not in Germany, France, Switzerland, or the U.S., or like these countries known for manufacturing and engineering. These are designed in America by American engineers. I think those guys are in California, but there's great people that work at this company too. So, and again, I'm not being paid to say all that. I just like it. They're good. It's good stuff so far.
Yeah, we've been wanting to do I bought one of like 6 different microphones that are all in like that $100 to $150 range, like the Earthworks, the Sennheiser, the Audix, the Shure, and we just haven't gotten around to doing it, but we're gonna have someone come in and like sing a song into all of them, and then we're gonna start to like listen through and see like can we actually sonically hear a difference between these, like what do we like, what do we not like about them, and kind of just do like this like fun little series about like these 6 microphones.
Yeah, I'd be curious, like somebody could get a handful of the V7s, like 6 or 7 of them that are different ages. So get one 2 years old, get one 4 years old, get a brand new one, run pink noise through it at the same distance in a controlled room through all of them and just put the traces on paper and see what it looks like and see how different each one of them are. And then do that with a 58. Find a 20-year-old one, a 10-year-old one, a 5-year-old one, and do the same thing. It'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So as we wrap up, can you share a little bit what you're up to now, what you're doing next, and kind of what the future for Lee Fields is?
Yeah, I'm still kicking around ideas of what to do next. I closed on selling the business earlier this year, so I just took some time off and just kind of chilled.
You're going to move to Michigan and join the team?
Not
at least out of
Michigan.
California.
I am going to leave California. The clock is ticking on that. Yeah.
I heard it here first.
When my youngest gets out of high school, I'm out of here.
Okay.
So that's just the writing's on the wall with that one.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I'll go back to probably Tennessee is my guess, is where I'll end up. So like business ideas, I'm an idea guy. I've got so many ideas of things to do. So I've got some things cooking there. In the meantime, I've been mixing a lot. I don't want to tour full time. Like I'm not going to go out on the road 150 days a year anymore. Yeah. I just turned 40 and that's just not for me. It kind of never was for me, really. But I love being the guy that gets called to fill in for people that tour 150 shows a year. So I just did a week with Switchfoot. So their guy, he went on a trip. He missed a week, so I filled in for him. I'm still doing stuff with United. They're on a bit of a hiatus right now. That stuff should get fired back up sooner than later, but they don't tour that much either. It's like a couple weeks at a time, a few times a year. So that's kind of perfect for me. And then I do churches. Like a church will call and be like, hey, you want to come mix a weekend here? And I go do stuff like that when it makes sense. And then I've started this thing where once a month I'm calling it the Mixing Club, where I'm having 3 or 4 guys at a time here in this room. So I've got a little mixing studio. And they bring their tracks in, a show file and their patch sheet, send me lots of data, and then we dig into their tracks, and then I build a Pro Tools session set up just like a front of house console. So it's not like anything that you couldn't do on any front of house console. It's more gear agnostic. It's like we're using a high pass filter, an EQ, a dynamics plugin, and then some like plugins that you could put in Super Rack. And really building like a live show here in a studio setting that's really controlled, and we all just talk about it for a couple days. And then we hang out and go do fun stuff. Like 1 or 2 of those a year will be like a group of golfers. I live on a golf course, so then we'll go play golf for half the day for 2 days. And then most of the groups are not golfers, and we go do other fun stuff. And maybe like, those super fast adult go-karts, or go rent a boat for the day, or go shoot guns and stuff like that. So it's more like we'll spend 5 or 6 hours mixing and then go do fun stuff and then go find like a super cool restaurant and hang out. And so I've been doing that a lot. I'm going to have a website for that soon. I don't have it yet, but if people are interested in that, they can just DM me on social and I can send some info on that. It's $1,500 for 2 days, 3 or 4 guys at a time. It's been fun. So I've done 4 or 5 of those since July.
Nice.
Okay. And I've just been filling them up just through DM. So I'll just like put on my Insta story, like, hey, I'm working on this thing for next month. And then my DMs light up. I want to come. And then I talk to these people, make sure they're not serial killers, and then get them out here. So that's been a lot of fun. I just had a group here a few days ago that just left. They were a blast.
Yeah. Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. Hopefully you enjoyed it and you'll come on again at some point in time. And I can
anytime, guys.
Finish my list of questions that I didn't get to get through.
Oh my gosh. Ask me one more. I'll give a 1-sentence answer.
I don't even know which one to choose. Tell me about your most recent tattoo work.
There you go.
Oh, I got a full sleeve.
Nice.
On my right arm. Up here, I can't take the shirt off, but it's up here. It's the Leonardo statue of David. It's his head. It's David holding Goliath's head.
Oh, nice.
Holding a sword. So I like took a couple different ideas, and then the rest of it is the very first microphone. It's an old ribbon mic, and the first speaker there.
That's sweet. With
a map, and then also, this is super nerdy. I can't take this off, but there's the meter from an API 2500 across the top of my arm.
All right.
which I thought was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
And there's also an SSL G-Bus compressor in there. You can't really see it, but it's like kind of hidden in there. So yeah, I got all that in just a couple days. It was kind of a brutal couple days, but I just knocked it out at once.
And the David piece looked like massive and awesome. So
yeah, it's big. Yeah.
Yeah. When I got this one, like just having my arm sit like this, for the 2 hours was exhausting. So
it was
tattoos. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
The place I went to is here in Sacramento called the Skull Museum. It's kind of like a famous place. They only do black and white or gray or whatever you call that.
Yeah.
And the guys are like wicked Photoshop designers. So they spend 3 or 4 hours just designing it in Photoshop, and then they're super fast tattooing. So each session was only about 4 hours, and it was 3 sessions.
Nice.
It was crazy.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. And until next time, we can't tell you how much we appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks so much. All right, thank you so much for watching that podcast with Lee Fields. Jordan and I really had a blast, and it was an honor having Lee on. Next episode, we have Chad Vegas coming on, and we were really pumped about that interview as well. We talked lots of video for the church, live streaming, camera gear, all that kind of stuff. Why Transformation Church used the gear that they used. A little bit of Chad's story coming from Bethel, into Transformation Church, and all the things that they're using video-wise. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so you get notifications. Hit the little notification bell. Comment down below what was your favorite thing that Lee said. What was the least favorite thing? Whatever. What do you think about his microphone? I love that. I think it's an Earthworks something, but and then again, shout out to our sponsor, Enhance AVL. Make sure you go and check out their website, enhanceavl.com. Book a consultation. We will be more than willing to walk through any part of your journey with you guys, whether it's just buying equipment, installing, designing systems, all that kind of stuff. So make sure you go to the website, enhanceavl.com. And again, thank you so much for watching. We do really appreciate your time.